Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Hyde. I'm on the data science team at Atropos Health. I'm going to be talking with you a little bit today about how we've been leveraging new developments in AI, but also thinking about the monitoring and quality assessment side of the equation, which is really important for operating in the healthcare space. Today, I'm just going to be walking with you through a use case that we've been having for the last couple months, where I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges we've been experiencing, how we've been addressing those with tools like LLMs, and then also walking through how we've thought about building a measurement framework to start evaluating performance on these really nuanced topics. So I'll begin by introducing our company and what we do. So at Atropos Health, our goal is to narrow the evidence gap. We really want to make sure that more medical decisions are being made with actionable and reliable evidence in hand. And the way that we kind of have a vision for that is making it faster and easier to create on-demand observational research from electronic health records. So when the literature can't address your question, let's just run a study. And we've been able to make major strides towards this by automating and structuring and streamlining a lot of the time-consuming parts of running a study, like cohort generation, epidemiological analysis, and creating a report. And so the state that we're in right now is that a client can come to us with a clinical question, and within 48 hours, we can return to them a production-grade observational study report, which we call a prognostogram. So what I really feel like we bring to the table is a really nice balance of speed and rigor. And our outputs are leveraged in a couple different settings, and therefore we have a couple different customer profiles. I just want to give you an example of who uses our product. So the first example of a customer that we work with is a healthcare provider. So they might have a patient that has a very specific situation. They have certain comorbidities. The physician's trying to decide treatment A versus treatment B. The literature is not specific enough. They could come to us with that very specific question, and hopefully we'll be able to generate a new study for them specific to that question. We also often work with academic researchers or medical researchers who want to use our product to either quickly iterate or as the basis of analysis for either an academic paper or a presentation at a conference. And lastly, we often work with life science companies who often take advantage of our speed to kind of accelerate their R&D process. So going more into our processes and some of the challenges we've been having, despite the fact that we've been able to automate a lot of components of the study that previously took a long time, getting from question to answer still requires significant time from our internal clinical team. So I'm going to walk you through kind of what our workflow looks like and pay special attention to these green steps, which are steps that our physicians need to take time to manually make changes or updates in order to get to our final answer. So the first step that happens with us is a requester will submit a clinical question. So it might be a question like, for patients with hypothyroidism, does GLP-1 or bariatric surgery lead to difference in emergency visits over a year? So that's like a very typical question we might be getting. At that point, the Atropos physician will refine that question. So they're going to be structuring that question into the needed implements like population, treatment, outcome. They're going to be clarifying the correct study design that's appropriate for the question at hand. And they're even also going to be mapping to ontologies. So, the right ICD codes or the RX codes that map to the diseases or prescriptions mentioned in the question. Once that's sorted out, an Atropos physician will write TQL, which is software we have to create cohorts. What TQL does is it makes it easy to implement the inclusion and exclusion criteria that is often needed for these sorts of analyses. Once the TQL is written, it's submitted into step 4, which is basically all the work that we've automated. If we hadn't automated this would be like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 steps. But this is just step 4, where a prognostogram is generated through a process of creating the cohorts, epi-analysis, and report generation. For step 5, once the prognostogram is generated, which is our final report, a physician will review that prognostogram. They'll check the numbers, make sure the definitions turned out correctly, make sure there isn't anything awry. If there's something wrong or misspecified, they might go back to step 3 and do some more refinement on the TQL. But most of the time it looks good. And the final step to kind of finish it off is they write usually a 3 to 5 sentence summary, kind of explaining this was the study design, these were our methods, here's a little bit of information about the people who were in the study, and here are the results. And finally, that prognostogram plus summary is returned to the requester. So how we've been developing with our need for growth and scale is we've been looking at building chat RWD, which stands for chat real world data. And this is essentially a more automated version of our workflow, automating the steps that weren't previously automated. So instead of a physician refining the question, we have an LLM do that now. Instead of a physician writing the TQL, we've automated that process from the more structured steps we get out of step 2. And also on step 5, instead of the physician writing that summary, we've been working on having an LLM write that summary, which we call auto summary. That's going to be the basis for the rest of the talk today. So a little bit about auto summary and what it does. Essentially, auto summary is responsible for presenting some pretty complex information in context. Summary is the top of the prognostogram. It's like the key takeaway. So it's really important that we get this right because it might be the first thing that a requester looks at. And essentially, auto summary includes a couple different data points. It includes the basic information like the intervention and control counts, demographic information about who is in the study, basics about methods and study designs, and also inferences and results based off the statistical analysis. And that's the one where it's really important correct interpretation occurs. Auto summary is built by a talented team of our engineers and data scientists, some of whom are in the crowd today. And it was really an exercise in prompt engineering. So we had to figure out what's the right information we can feed to the LLM to produce a reliable medical summary that fits like the format and the need for our users. So essentially, through a lot of iteration, we came to the conclusion of a prompt that included a lot of information like the initial question, the study context, structured cohort data, and statistical results. We also provide instructions to the LLM about like, we want it to be about 100 words, this sort of tone, and a couple example summaries for it to build off of. And many iterations were required to reach an acceptable quality bar for testing in production. But how we have it working today is that on certain eligible prognosticograms where auto summary can run, we pre-populate it into the summary box, and the physician can use that to kind of edit it as much or as little as they want to make the final summary. So sometimes they'll completely delete it and they'll start from scratch. Sometimes they'll send it out. Most of the time they'll just make some changes. So moving on to measurement. A problem that we had is we need a much more rigorous understanding of auto summary's reliability. So we've been running auto summary without any quantitative sense of how it was doing or knowing how much it could be trusted. So like we were often spotting and resolving issues. We're still having it go through a physician before it getting out to any customers. But there was no systematic or scaled way in order to assess quality overall or capture issues that were happening a lot live. It was a little bit more like people reporting things here and there. Also, just a lack of visibility after launch. Since we worked on this in a kind of iterative way in spurts, we might be looking a lot at the outputs as we're building it, but then once we kind of launch it out and it's kind of in production, we lose that attention. Things can drift. So our project goal was to develop a comprehensive evaluation framework for auto summary. Also wanted to establish an initial understanding of auto summary's reliability today. So just understand like what were the issues today, overall, how reliable is it today? And then also think about developing a path to ongoing live monitoring. So in the future, we just have this offhand. So in terms of our approach, our first step was just to determine like what questions did we want to be able to ask. So I always think like, what is the question in English that we want to be able to answer to know that auto summary is doing a good job or whatever that means to us. So the way I broke this out was into two kind of buckets. One is product quality. So like, how do we know the auto summary is producing a high quality summary? So like some of the questions we might ask to evaluate that might be like, how much did the physician need to change auto summary? Like how close was it to that gold standard version? Did it convey the right idea conceptually? Was the key information included? And also, was it written with appropriate language and tone? Relatedly, we also obviously care about business impact. Everything that we're doing comes at a trade-off. So we want to know the financial or operational impact of the change. So in our case, the business impact is how much physician time is saved. So this is probably the wordiest slide, so bear with me. But from the point where we have those English questions, the next step is figuring out what sort of metrics really map to those questions and enable us to get kind of a number or a way to sort out that question. We also have to think about the data that we have in mind. So in our case, we had a couple different data points. We had the actual study results structured in a prompt. We had the auto summary itself. And then we had the final version that was edited by a physician, which we could kind of think of as a gold standard in our case. So the first question about like how close was the auto summary to the final physician edited summary, we're going to look at some text similarity statistics. So we looked at things like Levenshtein distance, which is basically an edit distance as a percent of overall characters. We also looked at a more common summary evaluation of Rouge 1 that's become really popular, which is looking at the overlap of n-grams between two different summaries. Also wanted to understand, are we conveying the right idea? So a measure of semantic similarity that's commonly used is cosine similarity, which essentially measures the distance between two vectors of word embeddings, kind of get at semantics. Next, we wanted to look at accuracy. That's a really important one. Did auto summary include the correct information? And due to kind of the unstructured nature of a summary, we wanted to test out using LLM for a judge to evaluate accuracy. So ask the LLM, did it include the key numbers? Were the interpretations correct? That sort of thing. Similarly, we want to take a look at writing quality just to make sure it's professional enough for our clients. It has the right setting for a tone for a medical setting. So we also wanted to use LLM as a judge for that. And then finally, from a business perspective, we wanted to look at how much physician time is saved and translate that into $1 saved per month. From that, because we didn't have any tracking data in place at this point, we wanted to use UX research as a way to estimate that. Also want to note there are just multiple tools needed to turn a framework into a measurement, and something important to think about as you're considering what sort of metrics you want to calculate. So obviously data collection is really important. Are you storing the data properly in the correct format so you'll be able to use that in your analysis? So in our case, we wanted the question, the prompt, the auto summary, versioning details, etc. For metric calculation, thinking about what tools you want to use for that. In our case, it was mostly Python libraries and OpenAI's API. And then for exploration, visualization, Arize is a really good tool that we started using this as a great use case. And for ongoing measurement, Arize was going to be a tool that we explored for dashboarding. So findings. Our analysis identified both strengths and weaknesses for auto summary. So in terms of like writing quality and semantic similarity, things were looking really good. For accuracy, 92.5% of the responses were marked as accurate, but accuracy is really important in the medical context. So it's something we potentially would have a much higher goal for, probably in the high 90s. And text similarity, really what we want for auto summary is it to ideally be something that can kind of go out into the wild 99% of the time without being touched, or if it needs to be touched, it's very lightweight. So we're probably hoping for more like 80 to 90% of the text is the same from auto summary to the final version. But it's not all bad to have metrics reveal issues because you can find learnings from that. So by digging into the slices that had those lower metrics, we found a few common issues that we could start working. One is that occasionally we had a very long auto summary. So occasionally it'd be like 3 paragraphs instead of 3 sentences. So that was obviously a misinterpretation that led to very high percent of text change. There's also the occasional swapping of numbers. Sometimes treatment and control arms got swapped, which is a problem. Sometimes like cohort and outcome data got swapped. So paying attention to that, thinking about how we can solve that. Sometimes auto summary struggled with interpretation of no significant outcomes, or also struggling with having many outcomes to consider. Something I actually thought was the most interesting, though, is that I observed many different styles in writing, not only between different auto summaries, but also between different physicians as well. I think this kind of stands as an example of, this is not necessarily an issue with auto summary, as it much reflects an issue with the fact that we didn't really have a standardization of how we really want our summaries to look. I mean, obviously physicians are going to have different voices. We might want to standardize that as we grow. And this is a place to actually back up from kind of the auto summary picture and think about, as our summaries in general, what do we want? So in the future, we'll have less kind of some physicians adding more information, some physicians adding less information, and more have a structure in place that we've deemed is the right process. We can also learn things about the metrics themselves as we go through this kind of like initial evaluation. So unsurprisingly, we tested out 2 different text change metrics, Rouge 1 and Levenshtein distance, and they were strongly correlated, almost identical when you track them over time. I mean, so the learning here is simple, that these are highly duplicative, and you wouldn't need to have both of these in a final analysis. You can choose one for whatever reason that fits your use case. Another interesting finding is that LLM as a judge really struggled when we asked it to assess that accuracy question, when we asked it to be like, did it get all those interpretations right? Did it include all the right data? And this issue maintained despite a lot of different if I might. I can try to talk loud. It's flashing. I'll keep talking though. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So the issues with the LLM as a judge assessing accuracy maintained despite a lot of different prompt engineering. I tried to make it assess on a scale of 1 to 10. I tried to give it categories. I eventually ended on just a binary accurate or not. But two issues we identified even with that best version of the binary. One, it didn't align really well with a human. So in one example, we had a set of 20 questions that were labeled by a human, or auto summaries that were labeled by a human, the same 20 that were labeled by the LLM as a judge. And they both identified the same number of accurate and inaccurate, but the overlap was very small. And even internal consistency was a problem. So as you can see on the right, run 1 and run 2 are both runs of the same LLM as a judge, same prompt, same data, 5 minutes apart. And you can see they're similar, but it's not even agreeing with itself. So it's helpful to see these issues because it elucidates the need either for better LLMs, more structured prompting, or even maybe this is a place where we just need human review if it's something that's just too nuanced for LLM to handle right now. In terms of the impact of this work, basically we've continued rolling out auto summary, kind of got enough confidence in auto summary as a product, especially given the guardrails we have in place, to continue work to expand this to other study designs and keep it in production. And by looking at hotspots of issues, we're able to identify a few common things to fix. So there are issues of handling multiple outcomes or producing summaries that are too long or swapping data points. These are things we can try to fix with prompt engineering. And also we have other issues we might want to fix with process and standards, like how should summaries actually look, or new LLMs, or adding new data. We've also begun setting up ongoing measurement and alerting with Arize. So this makes it both easier for our data and engineering teams to just very quickly have like a quantitative view at their fingertips of how well auto summary is doing and which dimensions are doing well or poorly. And it also gives a lot of more visibility to our broader stakeholders about what's going on with auto summary. Actually, right after I made this dashboard, I didn't tell anyone about it, but the next day a product manager was like, what's going on with auto summary in June? So like it's creating a lot more interest in the product. Alerting is also a tool that we're looking into exploring that makes monitoring a lot more passive in a good way. So if you're like, auto summary is generally doing fine, but we just want to know if accuracy dips below 90%. You can set up those exact rules where it's like, if it's below 90% for 3 days, send me an email, so I'm paying attention. And then looking forward, we also see opportunities for measurement improvement. So by doing this one-time process, we've been able to better understand and brainstorm needs for the future. So we might do things like adding human review for accuracy, given the challenges with LLM as a drug, as a judge. So like adding a thumbs up or a thumbs down flag, or just kind of a way for our physicians to note to us when they think there's a problem. Also considering collecting additional data so we can do further cuts and make analyses easier and automated in the future. So cut by prompt version, model version, study design, that sort of thing. Also want to be setting more goals and guardrails. Now that we have these initial metrics, we're going to be thinking about what is the standard that we want to set? When do we actually drop what we're doing and intervene on the product? And also hopefully get to a place where we can run more experiments robustly. So get to a place where we're doing more A/B testing. We can test out different LLMs. We can test out different prompts and see how they're doing on a standardized set of metrics that we agree are important. So kind of just to close out, I think really a learning here was that just kind of doing a really scrappy and iterative measurement system the first time has really already brought about improvements to the product and culture around quality that exists. Thank you.